everyone. This is Arif Rahman once again live from London. This is around 9:30 in United Kingdom time, Greenwich Mean Time or British Summer Time, whatever you call it. I know this live is not actually properly announced to you in advance. It's just I wasn't sure if the timing would be right or not. But now we are here, and today's discussion is about Myanmar, the formerly known as Burma, and a little bit of history and how it behaves within its own national boundaries and how it treats its own indigenous people or minority groups. We have recently seen around Bangladesh side what it has been doing with the Rohingya ethnic minority communities, and a lot of people are calling it ethnic cleansing that is happening. So obviously we know all about that because the Rohingyas managed to create an identity for themselves, which is a Muslim identity, which is a part of the nation of Islam. And we have seen how that helps, a lot of different communities because now their story is known throughout the world. But our discussion today is not focused on the Rohingyas because, obviously there is enough coverage. But a lot of us don't really know much about how Myanmar itself treats its own people, how good the character of the country is. And generally we relate with the Buddhists, and generally because Buddhism is kind of seen as a soft what can everyone see me? Because I think it's got hung a little bit. Okay. And a lot of people think that because Buddhists are nice people generally and so don't kill the people, etc., they think that the Myanmar government would be nice and etc. But I have a friend in America, Kendall Meade, and we actually met quite kind of randomly, suddenly, and we are good friends now. He has an interesting history of his own past, which I think we're going to hear from him. And he has some experience about this Myanmar, not directly, but he lived in Thailand for a long time. I don't want to spoil too much of the fun. We will hear from him directly. But he knows how Myanmar actually treats ethnic minority communities within Burma, but not on the Rohingya side or Bangladesh side, but on the other side, eastern side. Without further ado, let's go and meet Kendall. Hello, Kendall. We're live now. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you just fine. Can you hear me?
Yes, I think that is really great that you made time for us. And I know we've been talking about these things for some time, but we managed to find some time to actually talk today. So I'm sure you heard whatever I said in the past few minutes, my usual babbling. And I haven't actually done much research into this before actually starting this discussion today. So whoever's watching this, please excuse my ignorance. We'll just go as our personal experience goes. I obviously have been listening to this and have seen a lot of sufferings of the Rohingya people, but Kendall has got some story that he has heard, and some may have seen when he was in Thailand. So, Kendall, can you give us a little bit of your background, how you went to Thailand? Because your subtitle, your identity is actually, people can see here, is saying ex-Christian missionary. Can you highlight a little bit about that?
Okay, so in 2005, I moved to Thailand, October 6th, 7th, something like that. Early autumn, early in the rainy season there.
How old were you then?
I was 19.
19 years old, okay.
Yeah. And it's
a long time ago.
It's a long time ago now. It's kind of a story unto itself. I was an atheist when I got sent to be a missionary in the first place, and then I wound up converting to Christianity relatively quickly. And I had been sent to teach English with a Korean missionary family that was, they're Korean Americans, refugees from North Korea, actually. who had lived in California for 20 years and spoke English with basically native fluency, and then had moved to Thailand to teach English and spread the word of Jesus and all of that fun stuff. And I got sent over to teach English with them, and their decision almost immediately was, this guy speaks English too fast. He can't teach with us. He's not the nice, preppy, presentable American Christian that we want to present to the Thai kids for the advertising of the Christian religion. Let's not have this guy teach with us. And so I was basically there with nothing to do. And so what I found relatively quickly was a lot of refugees and tribal minorities from Burma, and a really similar set of stories coming out of them, which was on the border with Thailand.
We'll get to the story of the Burmese people in a second. We just want to hear about your story while you were in Thailand, because I think although you appeared in my show before, but that was a very long time ago. I don't know how many actually remembers. Your story and your journey, I want to hear a bit more, and then we will, I don't want to spoil the, fun just yet. So you are an American citizen, and you went to Thailand as a Christian missionary when you were, I would say, relatively young, 19-year-old, and you spent how many years in Thailand?
I spent 8 years in Thailand overall. Only about 3 of those were doing active missionary work. So the first three and a half years that I was there.
Okay, and then after that, you just spent some time over there.
Yeah, after that, I entered university and started a business and wound up having 2 kids, which in
Thailand or here?
I had 2 kids in Thailand, which are now my kids here.
Here, okay. So, and but you are back in the United States now, and but what happened to the Christian missionary business? You are not a Christian anymore, what I hear.
Yeah, so that's kind of a long process. So
no, I don't want to. I'm not saying about the long process, but your current identity. You're not identify as yourself as a Christian anymore.
Yeah, I kind of describe myself as the annoying kind of atheist.
Oh no, the godless monsters of the earth. Oh no.
Something like that, yeah.
I'm like you. I'm an atheist as well. So you used to be a missionary. You went to Thailand as a missionary, and you have met with the local Thailand people. And which part of Thailand you were actually working those 3 years, and what type of people you met, and what part of you said you were teaching English at that time, but during your time, what sort of interaction you had with the Thai people?
Okay, so when you say with the Thailand people, I'll make a distinction between the ethnically Thai people in Thailand and the tribal minorities there. It's there's a lot of different native languages. I want to say 20 or 30 major tribal groups with their own distinct native languages that are kind of have some overlap, but are generally not really interchangeable.
So you're talking about in Thailand, there are lots of different, population group who has their kind of dialects of language, and do they look different to each other, or?
Yeah, they look different. They dress differently. They sound very distinctly different. Totally different. Some of them are in the
culture in Thailand. So, and obviously, let me just pull up a small map for people's understanding. Anybody seeing this, you will see that the middle bit is Myanmar. We have Bangladesh in one side, and the other side, that big bit is Thailand. That means the borders that we see between Thailand and Myanmar, although it's a political boundary these days, but if we go back history-wise, this whole area used to be one big place, right? Historically?
Yeah, well, kind of. These are different areas that are tribally claimed by different groups. So along the border from north to south, so if you look at the map on, see if I can orient it, so that if you look at it on the eastern corner of Burma, that is about where the Wa State Army is. So that corner right there, I'm making contact with China and Laos, and then with the rest of mainland Burma. That is the Wa State. That's the most heavily armed terrorist organization in the world. currently. And their thing is that they fund hydroelectric dams with producing the region's methamphetamines.
Oh, okay. We'll get to that in a second. So you're saying the Thailand itself has a collection of lots of different cultures and lots of different types of people, and Burma
Yeah,
has the same, right? It's not just
yeah,
one type of people in Burma, and
yeah,
there is no just single Burmese type of people, right?
yeah.
That means inside Burma there is also different variety of cultures and different types of people over there. So now this is the fun part is what do you what have you heard that the Burmese current, for example, the last 30 or 40 years or the 50 years or since the Second World War, what sort of behavioral evolution you have seen or you can remember that Myanmar government has? We obviously have a long history with Aung San Suu Kyi and then the military junta and then lots of embargo put on by the international communities. At some point it was lifted. But from your point of view, I want to hear a little bit about that. What do you know about Myanmar's history?
Okay, so with that description of the Wa State Army, just take that general cookie cutter stereotype of there's these groups that are linguistically distinct. They don't speak the trade language. Maybe they speak Chinese or some other language like English, but they don't speak Burmese. They don't speak Thai. They don't speak languages like this. And they're on the borders generally between these two countries. So all the way down, there's the Wa State in that corner. There's the Kachin State up north. There's the Lisu. There's Karenni. And there's the Rohingyas. All of these distinct groups, and they're generally on the borders because the SPDC, the Burmese military that has basically coagulated over the last 60 years, which is what you need to understand in the first place to understand what's going on. So Burma, since World War II, Burma has had the longest civil war in history. It lasted 65 years. It officially ended in 2011, if I remember correctly, with Aung San Suu Kyi being released and democratically elected and installed as a figurehead leader and all of this stuff. So she doesn't have a lot of powers on paper. Her job is basically to comply with whatever the government's party line is. And you have to remember, she's popular mostly because her dad was a very big figure in the very early moments of the Burmese Revolutionary War. So the first 3 years or something like that, he led the democratically elected government.
When was it? Which year roughly? Which decade?
This would have been 1945 to 1948.
Okay.
So this was
Aung San
very
Suu Kyi's
early.
father actually had a very good history. I mean, almost similar to what our Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, her father was actually called the father of the nation because he had a pivotal role in Bangladesh's independence during 1971. So Aung San Suu Kyi's father was also very important in that sense.
Yeah, and then he was politically assassinated, and 62 years of civil war followed directly after that as a result. Part of the result of that was that an ethnically supremacist kind of national identity has arisen or kind of survived as one of those. It's kind of, if you look at the history of nations, this is kind of how nations arise. Like, we're all the guys that speak this language, we're all the best, we're all going to work together and do this thing and have our own country, and it will be the biggest and best country. And that's kind of, it's that writ large that we're seeing in Burma, and it's kind of without the leash of civilization, without the leash of culture, preventing things like ethnic cleansing. So it's kind of like they don't, it looks like ultranationalism with some ethnic supremacist identity stuff that's going on.
Can I just pause you for a second here, because I don't know, but my mobile is showing that we are actually not live. Can people confirm, if you can just make some comment that, are you able to see us and hear us okay? Because I'm not so sure if it is actually going live or not. I would really appreciate if someone just say, yes, we can see you and hear you. Otherwise, we may have to rethink. Although I can see a lot of kind of engagements are coming through, but not many comments. And my mobile screen is, somebody just said something. Let me just go back to it.
Hear you. Otherwise,
There we go.
have to rethink.
Yeah,
Although
someone said, okay, sorry about that. Now I can see myself. That's good. So we'll go back to our chat, and sorry for the interruption. You were saying,
Okay, so if I remember correctly, I was talking about the ethnically supremacist. So the Burmese, the Burman tribal group, let's think of them that way. So they are linguistically, they have a linguistic identity, which is Burman, Burmese, Myanmar. Just one quick note about that. The Burma-Myanmar distinction, in their language, appropriately, when it is written as Myanmar, but when it is spoken as Burma.
what?
So yes, it's one of those weird things that's just it's like a local phenomena, but that's, I mean, this is the explanation to me, but
So there is a word that
there's
if
the
you
word
read
that
it
you write,
aloud,
which is
literally it says Myanmar, but
Yeah.
when people see the word, they say Burma.
yes.
Okay, so that explains why suddenly the country changed its name. I mean, we have seen name changes in other places, but this is the first time I've heard this sort of weird explanation. Okay.
Yeah, there's all sorts of weird names in the region. Like you probably have your own examples on the Bangladeshi side. On the Thai side, Bangkok, the capital city of Thailand, actually holds the world record for the longest name of any city because it is Krungthep Mahatsanagan, whatever. It's like paragraphs long. It's literally like
City name, but we know it as
1,000
Bangkok.
Bangkok is actually a slang name that refers to the city's history of growing olive trees. So in the early 1800s, when white people were first starting
So
to
in
really,
Thailand, they don't call the city Bangkok.
they don't. Thai people generally refer to it as Krungthep.
Wow.
Krungthep Mahasajan, Nisayon, something. It goes on and on and on. I never learned the whole thing properly, but it's like you could be sitting here and talking for 5 minutes with just the name. And it's not
I like that. It looks like they had a lot of time in their hands, so they kind of elongated all their names so that they don't have to talk about anything. Just pronouncing names would take the whole time. Okay,
Yeah.
so going back to Burma, obviously you're talking about this racially supremacist thinking group of, I would say one of the clans decided that
Yeah.
they are the superior and everyone
Yeah.
else is not.
Yeah, or not so much that they are the best. It's not. It doesn't have the same flavor as Nazism did in Europe. It's not that kind of supremacist, but it is definitely like we are in competition with these people, and we have to do whatever we can to win. So it is very very tooth and nail, very survivalist, and so in some sense it helps to know first they're coming at this from not knowing anything but civil war for the last 3 generations. This has been the norm. So landmines being laid in villages after the village is evacuated because it's being hit with mortars by the actual Burmese, the state troops. The State Peace and Development Council troops are the guys doing this. So their tactic is hit the village with the mortars so it scares everybody away, go in, plant landmines at the busiest areas, like around the wells, at the busiest streets, and at the biggest houses. And then they retreat and they go back over the next mountain so that the people in the village think it's safe, and they come back and they set off the landmines that the guys that have just retreated over the next mountain can then hear. And then they come back in, capture the villagers. They'll do whatever kind of public, they'll do executions in some cases, they'll do public rapes in some cases. They have rounded up women and done forced sterilizations. There's a lot of cases of forced labor, so they'll take, the 4 strongest looking guys and say, okay, you're going to come work with us and carry all our heavy shit for the next 15 days, or we'll shoot you. And if you run away, we'll come back and shoot the village.
That
And
does
it's
not sound like a civilized nation in any way.
It is not.
Okay, so I mean, I'm gonna kind of detract a little bit because the question just arose in my mind. I'm gonna show a diagram that shows a comparison of the size of the army between India, Bangladesh, and Myanmar. And you may not see this now, but I can read it out. Like India has active land force personnel, which is 1.2 million. Bangladesh has 0.27 million. Myanmar has 0.406 million. I mean, if we have a quick look at the map size, Myanmar is fairly sizable, say twice the size of Bangladesh. But when it comes to military size, it looks like they have much bigger army than it should need. My question is, clearly, as we all know that in Myanmar, the military government is always in power. Although Suki is kind of have a consulting or type of democratic fascia, but it's actually still military. So
Yeah.
You're saying that this dominant ethnic group is the military, and then
Yeah.
they kind of rule over all the other ethnic minorities. But why do they have to actually kill them and drive them away? What is their problem with those? Maybe it's a dumb question, but what do you think?
I don't know. My impression, more than anything, is that these ethnic groups, because of their linguistic isolation, when they do resist the military, they resist as these ethnic groups and as a cohesive. I mean, so there is that default pattern that they fall into as the default enemy. So it's an easy thing to sustain itself. So if all of the guys shooting at you are speaking the same language, then you learn to associate that language with the people who are shooting at you. And when the whole government is the military, that's the whole government's experience.
Right.
And so, and there's also, like, you have to remember the situation that they're in. When we say military and we think about militaries in the West, we're thinking about a very distinct, like, it has a supply chain and it has a formal command structure and it has, people who are responsible for overseeing that everything gets done. That's kind of not the nature of the Burmese military. So the Burmese military is very distributed and works kind of independently in all the different areas of Burma. And part of their job is to self-fund. So that's part of the reason that Burma is so responsible.
Gang, basically, that has a uniform of the country itself, and they have some sort of immunity from any prosecution, even if they do any shady stuff, which I think you are just about to talk about.
Basically, yes. So I mean, I need to shoehorn in a disclaimer here. I have been to Burma, I think 2 or 3 times, just over the border to get a new visa for my stay in Thailand. So it's like I've seen some stuff that's going on in the border, so I have that level of perspective firsthand. I've worked with a lot of people on the Thai side of the border who are originally, like, born in Burma and have really interesting stories and, bullet wounds in their heads and shattered hips and whatever and stuff from all of the injuries and of all of the crazy stuff that goes on over there. So that's kind of where a lot of my information is coming from talking to these people who are the first-hand experiencers of these different things. Okay. So and I want to
talking about the source of income of those distributed parts of the military and how they are not actually, that much legal in today's sense.
Yeah, and that's part of it, because Burma, if you looked at it in terms of resource wealth, it should be one of the wealthiest nations in the world, like, bar none. It has tungsten, it has cobalt, it has uranium, it has jade, it has gold, it has plutonium, it has everything. I mean, that's part of the reason that the Burmese military has been able to stay in power for so long, is that they get so much money for all of their, bullets and guns and rocket toys and all of the stuff that they don't really need to do all of the things that they're basically just doing with AK-47s and whatever other crap that they have. They get all of this in large part from Chinese companies coming in and paying them for the right to extract all of the resources. So all of the really rare hardwoods, teak, for example, is just being raped out of it.
I see. So corruption is happening. They're selling very
Yeah.
cheap.
Yeah. So there's mining. There's some reciprocal construction that's going on. It's not like it's all bad. So the Chinese companies that are coming in order to do their stuff, they need infrastructure in Burma. And so they kind of have to build that themselves. And so they're actually doing that. And so some of that is actually good. And so they're building hydroelectric dams for the Burmese side too, which like some of that is a really good thing to have. And I'm not saying like that should all stop, but the thing that it's funding is just
No, I mean, think about it. If in a civilized country where theoretically the people of the country is the owner of the wealth of natural resources of that country, and then if that gets extracted and sold off, then the benefit and the profit should equally be benefiting the nation, the nation itself, the people. But what we are seeing here in Burma is that the people don't really have any say because they are under siege from this gang. They are calling themselves military, and Chinese and all other nations are in bed with them because they are extracting their natural resource and they're not really paying the money they should be paying to a proper state. For example, if I had natural wealth, I would, for example, I would sell it in the market rate. But if I own a piece of mine and I don't really have to, give share it with anybody responsible, then I can literally, as an individual person, I can be a big millionaire. I can make a lot of money just by myself and selling it, literally stealing it and then selling it. So that's what exactly happening in Burma. And is that one of the reason why? Has it got any relation with its oppressing with those minority ethnic groups, you think?
Oh, definitely. So one of the stories, just as a piece of context, so one of the stories that was given to me by a Lisu guy. So this is the very far northern tip. The Lisu actually have a state in southern China. There's a Lisu state. It's an independent state. But yeah, on the Burmese side, there's a story of a Lisu guy who's a very, very poor farmer. He's got the worst field in all of the land because it's so rocky, and gets married to the richest guy's most beautiful daughter, and the rich guy doesn't want to do it, but his daughter loves him. And so the night before the wedding, the rich guy gives his daughter a rock that is, basically silver ore. So it's a really valuable piece of metal that, they can get food with and build a life with and the whole bit. And so the girl marries the poorest farmer with the shittiest land, and then says, okay, well, we don't have very much food because you can't grow food here, and here's this rock, so why don't you go buy some rice with this? And the guy looks at the rock and says, okay, I'll go buy some rice with this. And then he goes halfway to the village to buy the rice, gets attacked by some wild dogs, and throws the rock at them and loses it.
Oh.
And walks back without any rice, and his new wife is, of course, furious with him. And then he says, hey, don't worry about it. That's what all these rocks here are. And he picks the rocks up off the ground, and that's what all of the rocks on his land are.
Silver.
Yes, the silver ore that he just didn't know what it was. It's like
He just didn't know the value of it. Okay.
I mean, it's that kind of an experience, and that coupled with the brutality of the Burmese government means there's also stories of so a guy is out in the woods taking a shit in the mountains, and he's behind a tree poking at the ground, and he finds a piece of jade. A very nice, and a very nice, clear, good quality. Obviously, not a really big piece, but a nice piece.
Yeah, these are legends, but legends have some truth in them in the history. It basically tries to tell us that natural resource is so abundant in that land that people don't really realize the value of it because it's all around them. It's almost like, water around us, but not a drop to drink kind of scenario. So, I just
The
wanted to talk about this comparison between what's happening in Rohingya side, which is Bangladesh side, and what has happened and you have seen on the Thailand side and other sides. The whole idea of today's discussion and the idea of you having us as a guest is to show my usual colleagues and friends that Myanmar itself is not only oppressing on the Rohingya people just because they are Muslim. I have to say this because I will take a few minutes from you and we'll get back to you. But I need to just say this because a lot of our colleagues think that it's a victim Islamic victim thing, that because you're a Muslim, Buddhists are trying to kill you, and because everywhere in the world Muslims are being persecuted just because they're Muslim, they're so good people, etc., so on and so forth. But today what we have learned from Kendall, and if we do our research kind of neutrally and independently, we would see that the nature of this state, this Burmese state, and the nature of the government and what goes on, who rules there, and what are the involvement of different factors of external bodies, internal interests, is that there is nothing to do with religion. There is maybe issues of ethnic groups who wants a little piece of for themselves, and then the dominant group kinds of tries to kill them off because civilization has not grown to that level inside that land. But it has nothing to do with being Muslim. And although everybody else is trying to portray it as a Muslim because Rohingyas happen to look like the Bangladeshi people, and Bangladesh has become, rather than a secular state which was originally established as 1971, it has become a Muslim state and joined this Saudi-led Islamic Ummah, or the Nation of Islam. And that's how, because they are Muslim, they are being driven out, they were being persecuted. But if we look at it, other areas of Burma, we will see that the Burmese army has done similar shit everywhere. And that is the whole kind of take home thing we can take this from this discussion. So let's go back to Kendall, because I'm sure he has a few other things to talk about. Kendall, we are back with you now. And if you remember our discussion before in private chats, you were talking about the way this dominant group actually exerts fear into people, and the mine, laying mine, and then how people are going to get killed, and then news stories are going to get spread that do not come back. Can you enlighten us a little bit more on that side? Because we actually have seen similar stories inside in our side as well as in Rohingya side.
Yeah. So one of the things that the most shocking pattern of story for me when I learned about it was the public rapes. So rather than, if you take the idea of a public hanging where, there's the large square in the middle of the village and everybody comes up and watches as the guy is led up and, the ropes put around their neck and they're dropped and they die. Take that idea, and instead it's, 10 of the village's wives or kids or grandmas or whatever. And they are basically brought up on a pedestal in front of everybody and just basically publicly raped. Like, they'll have however many soldiers they have available that want to do it, just up there to do it.
And this happens as a punishment to the whole village or the whole community.
Yes. So this was something that would happen in retaliation. Like, if there was any gunfire from the village, this kind of thing would happen. So, any resistance whatsoever, it's just kind of, it's morally crushing. It's think about it economically. How many of these women are going to get pregnant? What are the dangers of this in a remote area? How often are they going to get infections and so on?
Their lives are literally ruined. So we have seen similar stuff happen in we have horror stories that we have heard from these Rohingya people who fled this part of this side of Burma, and exactly the same thing we have heard. Obviously, not that elaborate, gang rape and all these things, but
Yeah.
they're petrified when they flee. They're petrified. Um,
Yeah.
but I don't know how much you know about this, because I think recently, yeah, when you got in touch with me about this Rohingya business, um, we have heard recently that a number of, for example, the male citizens of the male members of a family would actually stay back inside Burma and drive their women and children back into another country like Bangladesh. Looks
Yeah.
like they're actually joined in some sort of military campaign against the Burmese military.
I mean, that seems possible. Yeah.
Okay, and there is a interesting side story to that. When we saw when this whole Rohingya thing erupted back in, I think, mid August. It's not new,
It's been
because
going on for years.
last 20 years we have seen Rohingyas flee. It's a continuous thing, but recently, over the last month or so, we heard that almost like 0.3 million Rohingyas actually fled to Bangladesh. That means suddenly
Yeah.
something has happened.
Yeah.
Made me interested on everyone is that the reaction of some of the neighbors. Generally, you would expect when a ethnic cleansing or some sort of genocide happens, people usually try to blame the government who's doing it. But in this case, we have seen China, we have seen Pakistan, we have seen India. Everybody seems to be supporting the Myanmar military junta. And that made us really baffled, because why would you allow killing of so many people and creating so much misery in people's life? And we didn't make any sense to us, and only looked like only Bangladesh, only Malaysia, and few other countries were actually trying to help these people. But we know they're not doing that because they're human. They were doing it because they're Muslim brotherhoodness, and which is slightly fucked up. But at least they were, shouting and screaming. But
There's that element. There's also, you got to remember that the India, the Chinese, all of these countries also have vested interest in maintaining the status quo for the Burmese government in Burma. So they have that.
what,
They
what
have
is the
that
interest? What is the vested interest? Can you elaborate on this a little bit?
continued ability to extract the resources.
So,
So they're
but this group in Myanmar is stealing the Burmese national resources, and they're selling it to the neighbors and making money. And what benefit India and China gets out of it? They get cheap supply.
It's not that the Burmese government is doing all of the work in Burma to actually get all of these resources out. It's Indian workers and it's Chinese workers that are in Burma that are doing this stuff. It's part of how hydroelectric dams are being built, because it's not tribal people that can build that. You don't have a PhD in mechanical engineering and electric physics, whatever it is, that you can design and build a hydroelectric dam up in the mountains in Burma, and figure out how to get cranes up there and how to get 100 metric tons of concrete and all of the rebar and all of the stuff.
But
That's
all these projects, the benefit of this project is to raise the living standards of the Burmese people, or
Of course,
what?
it's not. It's one of those, like, there is a certain amount of power that is required to mill lumber. There is a certain amount of power that is required to run all of the furnaces that do all of the ore extraction from all of the different ores that they're getting the different metals out of. There's all of these. How do you get the primary product out of the natural world and turn it into something that you can actually ship somewhere?
Okay, so it's actually to support the increased hunger of these supporting nations. So
Basically.
why do you think Bangladesh is because there is a conflicting. I mean, this you're not supposed to know this because you may not have seen direct internal news stories, but we have seen inside Bangladesh there is conflicting interest, because some people are trying to help the Rohingya people. Some are against Burma, but not really too much against Burma. But some are really violent and they're trying to go to war. And we know those as some sort of an Islamist type. So there seems to be a very Islamic interest inside Bangladesh trying to create some sort of war.
Of course.
Do you think like the Islamic nations have some interest in Burma to kind of get a piece of peace for themselves?
Of course, I mean, it's just the nature of the beast. It's any opportunity that they're going to have, they're going to like. It's in their interest to take it. So you have to assume that the bigger the opportunity is, the more people are going to get on board with taking it. So when you have this kind of a conflict where it's a Muslim and ethnic population. So not only are they distinctly this group of brown people, but they're also a Muslim group of brown people for other Muslims to glomp onto. I mean, that's just an easy opportunity to take. So
Okay.
it's like asking, do snowballs roll down hills or up them?
Because I mean, obviously, the Chinese bloggers and other media outlets are trying to portray this as a religious thing. We see that inside Burma, from our point of view, it was shown that only the Rohingyas are persona non grata inside Myanmar, which is not really true because there are other groups who are also not wanted, right?
Yeah,
So I think our visibility to things has to be much more clear. And I think our discussion today has helped at least made me understand what is going on. And I would definitely thank you for bringing that perspective into the discussion. And I think whoever has seen this and will see this in future would benefit from understanding what is actually going on inside. There is one question I would ask, and I always suspected: what about smuggling and drug production and drug smuggling? What sort of involvement Myanmar has in that?
yeah. This can kind of be a rabbit hole. This is a very big topic, but all of the tribal groups and the main Paman Burmese formal government have their hands in this. All of them condemn it and say this is a bad thing and we shouldn't be doing any of this, and none of this is for us. We're all exporting this. All of them have populations that use it. All of them have problems with HIV because of the production of opium, for example. Opium, methadone, heroin, that whole chain of drugs. It's actually, after Afghanistan, the number one producer of opium in the world is Burma. Yeah. So Afghanistan, I think, currently produces about 75 or 80% of the world, and Burma is something like 15 or 20%. It's very, very high. They're very prolific. And it's not like they don't have as much land that they can devote to it, and depending on the area, especially on the borders of places with Thailand and China where there's a lot of enforcement, they have to make the most of what limited space they have, especially with tree cover. So they have special strains of opium that they grow only under trees so that you can't see them from satellite photos. Yeah, because it's all of these, the level of detail that it goes into is just obscene. It's a discipline unto itself. Let's put it that way. But yeah, so
I have never heard opium because generally I thought opium needs to grow in a very sunny spot, but they seem to have come up with this, as you say, a variety that grows in a shady area.
yeah, so they have different varieties, and then you also have to remember that Burma has been called the rice bowl of Asia. It has the most productive arable land in Asia. So if you could farm all of the land that is in Burma, you would be able to produce more food per square meter of land than you would be able to produce in any other part of Asia.
Wow.
It's
So,
not that they're doing that. They're obviously not, but that's how they're able to feed so many people while being so inefficient with their land.
so the superpowers are sucking the lifeblood out of that country and being benefited, and they are
Yeah,
keeping the military in power, basically.
yeah.
So,
And there's another detail that I want to mention that
yeah,
it
please.
helps to understand. So part of the history is during the Vietnam War, America had a vested interest in preventing what they were describing as the domino effect of the Southeast Asian nations falling to communism. So they were worried that first Vietnam falls, and Laos falls, and Cambodia falls, and Thailand falls, and Malaysia falls, and all the way down, Singapore,
So
Indonesia,
just
etc.
to clarify, I'm just showing a map, and we can see that Thailand has a huge. Um, does Thailand have any huge what do you call this border with Vietnam?
Not with Vietnam, no. On the other side, Thailand has borders with Laos and Cambodia, and Laos and Cambodia kind of as one country, or if you put them together, are basically one long country border between Thailand and Vietnam.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. I can see on a different map that we have Thailand, which is kind of the similar size as Myanmar, and then we have Laos, and then we have Vietnam, which has got common border with China.
Yes. And actually, Vietnam's almost their entire history, when you start to look at that, has been defined as we're not part of China. We're really not part of China. Like you're really not going to come in and get us, China. And so the fear on the American side, and when you look at the history of the Vietnam War, it kind of like we're really explicitly the bad guys. Like we are as bad of a bad guy as you can possibly get. So Vietnam, after World War II, had been occupied by the Japanese, and they went back to being occupied by the French. And the resistance that had been resisting the Japanese occupation started resisting the French occupation. And that was the origins of the Viet Cong. So that was the origins of Ho Chi Minh, and like that was 1945, I want to say. He wrote the first draft of the Constitution that was based on the American Constitution or the American Declaration of Independence from England. And he was asking the Americans for help in independence from France, the way that Americans had gained independence from England. So it's kind of that was
history, I would say.
Yeah,
remind me again, how is the whole Vietnam issue come into this Burmese thing? You wanted to see some similarity?
Yeah, I'm just historical context, because so much of this happened, or so much of this is kicked off by World War II, let's say, because Vietnam, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Burma, even India, Bangladesh, to my understanding, were hit by the Japanese. Very intense occupation, very intense fighting. In Burma, I have these are back 2 generations, the stories now. But on the white Christian missionary side, I have stories of people living in the jungle and hunting elephants with spear guns that they manufactured from, a bamboo pole, whatever knife blade that they had, that they could stick on the end of the pole, and a 12-gauge shotgun that they had 1 or 2 shells for that they needed to kill an elephant with. So they were using the spear instead of the bird shot. So, wow. Yeah, shoot the elephant because they're 4-ton animals that will kill you if they see you. They're not nice things in the wild. They kill lots of people every year. But kill that, dry all the meat that you can, and live in the jungle without being caught by the Japanese. That's on the white Christian side. On the actual Burmese, and especially on the tribal group side, one of the things that the Japanese would do when they came into these countries is they would counterfeit the local money. Like just massively, they would print as much of it as they could. They would give it all to all of their soldiers. They would just hyperinflate the local economy and make it so that only their soldiers had buying power. So everything depended on them. And so, I mean, I have stories from there's the Lisu guy who told me about. I think it was his uncle or something like that, who basically was a subsistence hunter, lived out in the mountains and was trapping animals and stuff like that, and bringing it down for the hyperinflated currency that he had no idea, because that was his only contact with civilization. So there's that, and then there's let's round up all of the pretty women and make those the prostitutes for the soldiers for the day. That kind of like the comfort women phenomena, which is also
you've also talking about the Second World War time.
That was explicitly their operating policy everywhere. It's just one of those like, if they're pretty, then let's have it. Why not?
Yeah. No, I think Japan is ashamed of it. But at that time, I think Japan was a superpower for that. I think we digress a little bit.
The reason that the way that this comes back into Burma. So these conflicts started happening, and as part of the response to them, one on the American side is the Vietnam War between the United States and Vietnam. But also part of it is they started giving military aid to Thailand, which as Thailand's internal defense policy against the encroachments of the Burmese, which like Burma has a long history of like trying to take parts of Thailand. Actually, the city that I was in, Chiang Mai, in the northern part of Thailand, for 300 years it was a Burmese city. after it was originally constructed and a Thai city for 200 years. And then it was a Thai city for like the last 350 some odd years after that. Yeah, so it's there's all this kind of history that's going on, and Thailand looking to defend itself, and with all of this military aid that it was getting from the U.S., started arming the tribal groups. So there is this phenomena of all of these tribal groups between the border of Thailand and the actual defendable territory of the Burmese. All of these groups have American-made weapons. They all have 5.56 and NATO caliber ammunition. They all have, I mean, some really surprisingly state-of-the-art stuff in some places, because remember, they have the money to buy this stuff now, and they can buy that from the Thai military that has it. Also, a lot of really bad subsistence, homemade crap guns that you don't want anywhere near you when they are fired.
They can fall on your face.
Both ends. Like I've actually talked to guys about like, okay, well, how do we take black powder and reload these cartridge cases for our AK-47 with them, which is like a really bad idea.
Yeah.
So like black powder is like
Right?
firecrackers. What's that?
You're not supposed to reuse, spent cartridges.
Well, you are supposed to reuse them, but under controlled circumstances, and it depends. Like you have to take care of it. Basically, it's one of those like if it goes bad, it can go really bad. Because it's basically any gun. If a cartridge is basically a really optimistic sort of pipe bomb that you set off, right next to your face when you're looking down the barrel.
Okay.
And the only piece of traffic
I know guns are one of your interesting story, side of I should say hobby or topic of interest.
Yeah.
But I think the basic point that we tried to discuss, and I can see that a lot of people have kind of left the discussion because they lost interest in this really detailed discussion at some point. But I liked the discussion because of it gave me a very open idea about what's going on into that region from what I heard from you, as if I was there, or at least get a feel for that region. Because when you're talking about an incident or an issue about in a region, it's not, as you said, it's not isolated. It's got influence from all different things. It's got history. For example, all these things may have started during the World War II, and different sets of power balancing happened. Different groups rise. Different types of multidimensional things happen. So my point, I already mentioned it a few times, is that it's not only a Buddhist versus Muslim thing that is we are seeing in Rohingya land, because it's mostly because the Burma as a nation may have Aung San Suu Kyi at the very top as a prop, I would say, but the reality is that they are being used by India, by China, and other countries to suck off their resources and not really getting paid. I heard that the Burmese general population would be very happy if they get egg in their meal. They think that is like a feast if they get egg. It's that how poor they are. Although they are living in a land of wealth, but they are not getting any part of that wealth because it is being hoarded by a gang. They call them military government. So it's a really fucked up situation, and the Rohingyas are just kind of in the middle of that whole shebang thing that is going on in this case. So I would request all our colleagues and activists who understand or try to understand the situation, don't get into the religion side of things too much. Don't even go into the ethnicity that they look a little bit Bangladeshi, but think about the Burmese system is equally hostile to anybody that would come on their way. And if the Rohingyas are sitting on a piece of land, living on a piece of land that is lucrative to the current regime, and they want to get that land back, they will slaughter the people out of that land. And that's what exactly happening. Even if these people were Burmese, even if these people were Buddhist, they would not hesitate slaughtering the same way. There is nothing to do with being Muslim and being Dravidian looking. So on that note, I would like to thank Kendall for joining us. And if you have anything else to add to this discussion, we would like to hear that. And otherwise, we could call it a night.
I just want to throw in a plug real quick for kind of a humanitarian technological project that I'm working on.
Oh, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, so it's the website is raspberrypiranha.com. So raspberry the fruit, piranha the kind of fish. You just spell them both properly. Yeah. So if you have you heard of a Raspberry Pi?
Yes, I think everybody knows about Raspberry Pi.
Yes, a Raspberry Pi. I mean, just in case for anybody who doesn't know what it is, it's a computer that's about this big. It's depending on the different model that you get, they're about $35, about 20 pounds UK. And it's basically what a desktop computer was about 10 years ago. So, I mean, you plug it into your HDMI monitor and plug in your mouse and keyboard and boot it up in 15 seconds, and 15 seconds later.
I think we are doing an injustice to this topic. Why don't we create another another day, completely technology focused, and we talk about this project? What do you say?
That sounds like a plan.
Yeah, I would definitely, because the audience would be different in that case, because I'm sure the audience that were watching us now are not everybody tech savvy, and they would get really bored.
That's the point. So the premise of the Raspberry Piranha thing, like, why is it a piranha? Because the idea is to give everybody the teeth.
Yes.
So the idea is to make it so that you can, of all of the open source projects, you can, for a small fee, we will take the open source hardware, we'll sell you the hardware at cost, and for that extra fee, we will put it together as that project. So the open source drones, Pi security cameras, all of the different 3D printers, CNC machines. There's all sorts of different things that are out there, and so this is kind of a project that I'm putting together as, like, in order to participate in civilization, there's some infrastructure that's required, and if you're in a place like Bangladesh or in Burma or in Uganda or out somewhere in the middle of nowhere where you don't have all the tools, this is a little 5-volt computer that gives you all the stuff you need for all of the internet and all of that part of the technological spectrum. It can have all of the data that you need for all of your cultural information, all your books, all your movies, all of that kind of music, all of that kind of stuff. And it can run all of the industrial stuff that you need to power your life. So your clean water and production of whatever goods you need to live your life, and things like the farm bot to produce your food. So that's what this project is aimed at.
Wow, fascinating. Yes, we would definitely like to hear more about that in another episode, and I would like to invite everyone to, if you're watching it in Facebook or in YouTube, do subscribe and get in touch. Keep an eye on the channel so that at some point when we talk with Kendall about this fascinating project that he's doing, you would get notified. So I think we can call it a night, and definitely thanks to Kendall for making the time and giving us his hard-earned experience of actually being in Thailand and actually interacting with local people and gathering the knowledge, which gave us a huge perspective on this situation that is happening in Bangladesh. So thank you so much, Kendall, and thank you for being with us. And whoever is watching and has been watched, thank you so much for watching, for tuning in. Please do share it with your friends, and if anybody tries to portray this whole situation as a religious or ethnicity issue, do share it with them. Give them the perspective that I just had from Kendall. Do share it. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you shortly, in near future with another topic that matters to us. So thank you. Take care wherever you are, and Darwin bless or Carl Sagan bless.
Someone bless America.
Bye now. Take care. Thank you.